is different about the physical web is it brings physical interactions into the world of search and browsers. If the physical web moves to Omnibox, it would be front and center, and it would create a fascinating dynamic in that now property rights translate directly into digital marketing rights.
You sit down, and within 30 seconds of sitting down, the barista came out to us and said, "Why is this URL popped up on my phone? It's for the good traveler. Is this something to do with you?" And I was just completely bowled over. And that was the end of the conversation about whether we should deploy the beacons. Oh, this is amazing.
We've done an awful lot on making beacons simple to deploy. You can take 1,000 of our beacons, randomly mail them out any place. You can do 100% of a deployment of our product without handling the beacons themselves. To having a live app in the App Store was 3 days. From the time the ballpark gave us the go-ahead to go do it, we had a branded app.
You're listening to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Bkosystem with Steve Statler.
Welcome to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Bkosystem, the podcast for location-aware solution designers and entrepreneurs. This week we are in Nashville, Tennessee, the capital of music. Is that the tagline?
Music City, USA.
Music City, USA.
Yeah.
So I'm here with Richard Graves, who is the founder and CEO of Bkon, who are a pioneering company in the physical web. If you have ever watched any of the Google videos on the physical web, sometimes they use a beacon to illustrate what they're doing, and quite often it's a beacon, spelled B-K-O-N, right? So, Richard, thanks very much for coming and seeing me as I was in town. I was here for a conference, and I just couldn't resist looking you up and chatting with you.
Steve, thank you. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, and we've done a little bit of work together. You provided some great input as I was writing the book. Hey, I just got to mention something. There's going to be a hissing sound in the background of this interview. It sounds a bit like a waterfall. And that's because there is a waterfall, a really huge one, outside the window of the room where Richard and I are talking. So try to ignore it. Don't adjust your headset. It's a waterfall. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Bkosystem, Bkon Technologies book. And since then, we've worked on a couple of projects. So maybe we'll talk about that. But things I'd like to cover in this conversation are, you've got some new news coming out, and so we're going to embargo this until we can talk about it, talk about your product. Before we get there, let's just talk about physical web. Most people who watch the podcast know what the physical web is, but we'll kind of do a really fast intro. But what I really want to get into with you is what you have learned about the physical web in terms of what it takes to deploy a solution and make it work, and where we are and where you think we're likely to go. So I think everyone should be interested in that. Before we get into that, let's just introduce Bkon, and can you give us kind of the elevator pitch on your company?
Sure. Bkon was founded in late 2013, so we've been in the beacon business since its inception. We entered when Apple adopted Bluetooth Low Energy, becoming the first cross-platform beacon technology. We understood then that there were going to be hundreds of applications that that came out of the technology. Our original business plan was very similar to what the physical web is today. We envisioned a future, a range of applications that fall out of people being able to interact with things in their near environment. We support iBeacon, did support it, when it came out. But we never put our full backing behind it because we always felt like that it was not a technology that could scale. Couldn't scale in the sense that it always had guardrails. Beacons are tied to apps, and every time you go do a new client, it's you're almost like an agency. You're working with them to create a one-off application. Mm-hmm. We wanted something that was more open, more universal, that could scale globally with speed. So we sort of held back from putting too much effort into iBeacon applications. saw the physical web early concepts come to market in late 2014, and since then have put 100% of our effort into supporting the physical web. So we've been early adopters and have had a very large R&D team working full time for 2.5 years now on physical web technology.
How many people in the company?
We have 16 employees, about half of those being developers.
Cool. And you're self-funded? Are you?
Self-funded and angel investors.
Angel investors.
Seed angel investors. Yes.
Okay. In terms of how, if I'm going to categorize what you do, you produce hardware. So there's and you have an orchestration layer, and I normally think about orchestration layers as the kind of the campaign management and making sense of the chaos of lots of beacons in the iBeacon context. But obviously you have really, I think one of the things I want to peel and look into is answer, okay, given what Eddystone URL is and the physical web is, which is broadcasting URLs,
right.
What's there to do? So we'll go into that, but you basically have that middleware component, and you provide a little bit of analytics as well. Is that fair to say?
For the physical web, we're a complete end-to-end solution.
Okay.
So we make hardware.
Yeah.
We make software to manage deployment of beacons. We show battery state. We keep up with where they
fleet
are.
Management.
We show
Yes.
fleet management kind of software. We have content management.
Yep.
You can build web pages on our platform. We have metadata management. So the physical web is a search technology. So you're surfacing a search result. So we independently manage the metadata, which are the incentives for people to click through to the underlying websites. And we have what I would call a full content switch. So we can dynamically control what content appears when people select a physical web beacon. So we have everything end to end. It's a global platform. We have customers now in about 40 countries, designed to be enterprise scale and manage privacy, security. Anything a Fortune 500 company would want. For a global deployment of this technology.
And can you talk a bit more about your customers? We're not going to go into the weeds in terms of your product yet, but it would be great to get a sense of who's using the physical web from your perspective as one of the major players providing solutions for it.
There's two flavors of the physical web out there. There is the original classic open source version of the physical web, which relies upon major browsers like Chrome to surface the physical web content. There are thousands of people that have tried that out on our platform, and I'm sure thousands of people that have tried out Eddystone URL physical web beacons on other platforms. To date, it does not have wide adoption. Anybody that says it does wouldn't be accurately reflecting the state of it. It doesn't have adoption because there is not consumer awareness. You can put an Eddystone beacon out there, and it will broadcast content that is visible in Chrome and other physical web browsers, but there is very low consumer awareness. And the evolution of the industry has been an evolution of primarily Google, trying to understand where consumers will interact with physical web beacons. So they initially tried it out in Chrome under notifications. Mm-hmm. They then moved it to Chrome and Android, but then they moved it out of Chrome into nearby notifications, moved it back into Chrome, and now are considering moving it to Chrome, but in a different place. Rather than in notifications, they're going to move it into Omnibox. Now, I say going to, let me say that with a caveat. It works that way on my phone right now, in that if I touch the search box,
and that's what Omnibox is. It's the search box.
Omnibox is the search
fancy
box.
word for the search box on Google.
If I touch it, because I have the beta version of Chrome Live on my phone, if I touch it, I will immediately see nearby physical web beacons.
Yes.
So there you have captured my attention in a moment of intent. I'm looking at the screen. I'm looking at where my finger is. immediately under my finger, I see the physical web beacons. It's set up so that it's not disruptive to the normal search process. If that content serves my needs, I can select it and go to it, the physical web content. If not, I continue my search uninterrupted. That's not the way Chrome works. That's the way I believe it will work in the next release.
Okay, and so you say it works that way on your phone. Why does it work? That implies it doesn't work that way on other people's phones.
That's correct. It does not work that way on other people's phones. Google is a fairly open company.
Yeah.
You can go online and read about the developments going on in Chrome. So we've been following the active development of Google trialing the physical web as it relates to Omnibox. It moved several weeks ago into beta. When it moves into beta, it's really on everybody's phone. You just have to turn on the beta flag.
Right.
So I, went into my Chrome, turned on the beta flag, and could start using Google's Omnibox, iteration.
And how do you turn it on? Just if other people want to do that?
You type in Chrome ://flags.
Right.
And hit enter. And with that, it'll come up with a couple of different flags, one of them being the physical web, and if you turn it on, you'll get a little warning that it's it's beta code. It's not necessarily yet ready for prime time. No guarantees associated with it, and you can turn it on, and you will, when you search, immediately see nearby physical web beacons. My belief is, and obviously I don't control Google and don't have an inside track, on what they're doing, but I believe this will go live in the next release of Chrome. Chrome has a new release every 6 weeks. It's common for stuff in beta to go live. So I believe I'd give it 70% odds that it'll go live March 15th. I'd give it 25% odds that it would go live 6 weeks after that, and 5% that they won't go forward with this particular iteration of the physical web.
And so we're talking about the Omnibox, which has to be one of the most, if not the most valuable piece of real estate on anyone's phone. I can't think of anything that's more valuable than the search box.
Right. The physical web right now surfaces in notifications. It's a place that it's not necessarily easily seen.
Yeah.
When you ask about customers, there are a minority of customers out there that get enough traffic through notifications to be happy with their physical web deployment.
Oh, really?
There are customers out there that are satisfied with the amount of traffic they get surfaced through that. But if the physical web moves to Omnibox, it would be front and center, and it would create a fascinating dynamic in that now property rights translate directly into digital marketing rights. Nobody can come in your store and put a beacon in there. Only you have the right to put a beacon in there.
Yeah.
So if it's your beacon and you control the content, you control the first content people see, upon a search.
So I'm in a grocery store and I'm searching for recipes, and I happen to be in the soup section, and I go into the Omnibox, and then potentially I could have a Heinz or some other supermarket negotiated site that pops up in the Omnibox when I start.
What you would see in the search is that you would see the title of the destination website, and it could say, tap here for the recipe of the day. And that may attract enough of the shopper's curiosity to tap. They like the recipe, they go buy the ingredients.
So that could be huge. But that would only work with Chrome browsers, right? The Omnibox functionality is different on
Google,
on Safari.
A different Google application, right? It would only work with Chrome. My understanding is that there are about a billion Chrome users.
Okay.
So it's a massive audience, even though it's not a universal technology.
Yeah.
Of course, the physical web does still work with other browsers. So there are other ways to get at the same technology. And part of the alter ego of our company is that we make any app compatible with the physical web. So if you want shoppers to be in a store using your app, then they can also surface physical web content.
We'll get into that in just a second, but let's go back to how people use the physical web. And so basically the physical web is about discovery. It's kind of get rid of the QR code. Let's actually use radios to broadcast URLs, and therefore, that should make engagement easier. And Scott
That's
Jensen does a great job of ridiculing QR codes with all sorts of jokes and just amazing presentations. So you've been great. You've supported some pilots that I've kicked off, and one was at San Diego International Airport. It's just ramping up now. We put our first couple of beacons in Ryan Brothers coffee stands in Terminal 1, Terminal 2, just before security. And actually, it was before we deployed them. I was introducing them to someone at the airport who I needed to convince that this was, worth doing. And to be frank, he was pretty skeptical. It's like, I was describing all the backward flips you had to do to see the physical web on an iOS device, and you have to have Chrome installed, and you have to enable it in the Today widget, and no one really uses the Today widget. So anyway, I bought a couple of your beacons in, programmed to broadcast appointed to the Good Traveller, which was the project, carbon offsetting project I've been working on. So we meet at Ryan Brothers Coffee, we sit down, and within 30 seconds of sitting down, the barista came out to us and said, "Why is this URL popped up on my phone? It's for the Good Traveller. Is this something to do with you?" And I was just completely bowled over. And that was the end of the conversation about whether we should deploy the beacons. Right. Oh, this is amazing. And so he had got it. There was kind of something that said nearby on his high-end.
That's nearby notifications.
Nearby notifications.
Means he had an Android phone, and they will natively surface physical web content in nearby notifications. They surface it when the phone wakes. So you don't force them. When you wake your phone, if you look at your notifications, physical web beacons will be embedded in that list. Now that's a fairly recent thing that Google has got that fluid. They did it, had some bugs, moved it back to Chrome, did it again, had a few bugs which they worked through, and really only, in our view, only in the last 30 days that it started.
Yeah. It's like 3 weeks ago this happened.
Right.
But to me, that's
really started working in a nice way, and I think more people are seeing enough value and utility out of the physical web as it works today, right now, to get value. Now, I can't mention their name because I don't know that we're allowed to, but we had a major European university that has deployed 50 physical web beacons, and they just signed up for a long-term subscription to start dynamically managing the content. They're happy with them the way they work today. If Google starts surfacing that content through Omnibox, then they're going to be ecstatic because their audience is going to increase dramatically in size.
Yeah, but I think that nearby use case is a great one, because if you think about it, it's so often the case. You sit down, you go through airport security, you unlock your phone, boom. That's when you want to kind of be aware of your context. You sit down at a cafe, you sit down in a lecture hall, and so even if we just stick with what we've got, then I think it has value.
I would agree.
Any other examples of where people are using the physical web? Because we've those of us who've researched it, we've seen the parking meter example and the bubblegum vending machine, and those are all very cool. Are you seeing other examples of physical web controlling, going beyond notifications to actually control devices, or is that kind of very futuristic?
I don't think it's futuristic at all. I think there is huge demand. We've worked on several projects for controlling devices with major category-leading brands that are trying to drive experiences with shoppers rather than just coupons and advertisements. Experiences of the type that a shopper may be in the aisle and interact with the brand and be dispensed a product sample.
That's one I've come across separately as well. I'm sure it's not the same thing. Major consumer brand, they, it's sad, but it's replacing the people that work giving out samples in Costco or whatever. That works, but it's expensive. And I think this ability to have engagement and then provide a reward in an automated fashion, that has legs.
That and controlling displays. You control the display on people's phone, but you can also control displays in people's mirror environment. So there's a lot of products that directional videos and live interaction is valuable to promoting customer loyalty or selling the product. So we're seeing a lot of people doing that. We've developed a lot of applications, worked through these use cases, technically, created prototypes with big brands, and they've been waiting for the physical web to get a little bit more traction through Chrome. Mm-hmm. We've even had large brands that have made large Beacon purchases that are still queued up to deploy, waiting until the audience is big enough to justify it. So, as nearby notifications smooths out, and as the physical web comes to market through Omnibox or through some other near derivative to that, because I'm fairly confident, or I'm very confident, that Google is working hard to put physical web content on the screen where people will see it. Mm-hmm. Maybe it doesn't work out exactly as in Omnibox. I think it will, but I think it will be month by month, better than it was before. And at some point, we're going to reach the tipping point where these large brands that have been developing some of these experiences start saying, we're ready to start deploying it. And with that will come increased consumer awareness and a ramp to the technology. But if they release Omnibox here in a couple of weeks, I think it will happen with dramatic speed. I think there will be a race, because you'd be crazy not to have a physical web beacon in a retail store.
Because the cost is so low. So the problem is, at the moment, the benefit is pretty low, because it's a discoverability mechanism that's hard to discover. But that could change very, very quickly.
Change overnight.
And the thing is, the cost is so low. So another example that we've worked on, San Diego Library, they have an innovation lab where they offer free 3D printing. I've been printing a gizmo to attach beacons to pallets in a manufacturing environment. And I'm like, these guys have been really nice to me. What can I do to help? And I'm like, I'll speak to Richard, see if I can give them one of his beacons. And so we did. And, the process, it took 10 minutes to explain. It took 2 minutes to set the thing up with the URL of San Diego Central Library Innovation Lab. And now it broadcasts the web page that has the opening times and that sort of thing. It's just so easy. Versus, years and years, or months and months, and hundreds of thousands of dollars of app development. Now, it's not going to change someone's life doing that, but it's that low cost, and we just need to kind of ratchet up the benefit. And before we talk about your products, I do want to get on to what the new news is there and get into more detail about what you do. What are your thoughts on iOS? Do we just sort of write it off, or are there enough Chrome and Opera browsers that support physical web on iOS to make this, to allow us to answer that question? Because with iBeacon it was like, oh well, it works really well on Apple but doesn't work very well on Chrome, and now it's on Android. Now it's the opposite with physical web. Is there any hope there, or it's unlikely that Apple's going to jump on the Google bandwagon and support physical web within iOS? We do know that there are browsers that support the physical web that do run on iOS. Do you have a sense of what the proportion is of iOS users who have physical web-aware browsers running on their phone? When we're talking to the marketing guy that says, what about the iOS market? Is there...
this is a wild guess on my part. I have looked it up, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I think it's probably in the order of magnitude of 10 or 15%.
Okay, so it's not zero, it's something.
Yeah,
and there's certainly a way to get to it.
Right. Omnibox could drive much faster adoption on iPhones, simply because if you have 50% of the population, here in the U.S., vastly more overseas, that suddenly say, I really like interacting with things around me. The deals in the stores, the product interactions, the shortcuts, the informational content that I can get from these physical web beacons is of such value. I'm going to start using Chrome because it natively surfaces all this stuff. If you have major adoption in the short term, then obviously that drives the browser suppliers to say, we don't want to lose this audience.
Okay.
So
very good.
I believe that rapid adoption will drive more adoption. And of course, any app can support the physical web. I have an iOS device and probably have 10 different apps on my phone that support the physical web. Obviously, I'm not a normal iPhone user. So.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about your offering, and I think people have got the sense that what you offer is the fleet management, and I've programming beacons is pretty straightforward with apps that most vendors supply, but what you allow is for someone to stay in their armchair or in their office and basically take the URLs that are being broadcast by beacons that are in place, and you enable a redirect process so that you can switch the content overnight and have all sorts of things happen that makes management of those beacons in the physical web context a lot easier. And the thing that I hadn't realized until I kind of revisited what you guys were doing was that you're also enabling apps. So can you tell me a bit more about how you are merging physical web with the app space? So if I want an app and I don't want to spend $100,000 to develop it, how could you help?
Well, there are a lot of facets to this. There are, and we've noticed 3 or 4 that are starting to come to market even in the last week or so. As the physical web starts gaining steam, you're seeing more redirect platforms out there. These are platforms that enable you to, embed a code, a shortened URL. They're glorified domain name shorteners is what physical web platforms are that allow you to redirect, physical web content. These platforms that are coming to market with, redirect capabilities are where we were, we had a live physical web, redirect platform in the spring of 2015. So over 2 years, we've had, live redirect capabilities. Mm-hmm. Since that time, we really pushed the envelope of everything you could possibly do, where the physical web can possibly go. We filed 6 rounds of IP, over the last 2 years, and have really pushed the envelopes. And we did a lot of things that, to my knowledge, no other physical web platform does, and many people told us was technically, impossible. We're the only platform that, to my knowledge, shows battery state on physical web beacons without using any other ancillary frame. Mm-hmm. We're the only one that supports, directly in a URL frame, anti-hijacking and anti-spoofing. So we can recognize copies of our beacons and not allow them to be copied. So we have, a rotating key embedded in the URL itself, that's synchronized, with our platform. We've done an awful lot on making beacons simple to deploy. You can take 1,000 of our beacons, randomly mail them out any place. You can do 100% of a deployment of our product without handling the beacons themselves. Nobody has to go pair with the beacon. They're all pre-programmed with a physical ID that identifies the location from the instant they're installed. We can manage range control from the cloud, only in apps, but a lot of our usage is in apps. So we can change range from the platform without ever interacting with beacons. So our beacons are even shipped in a non-connectable state. You don't ever pair with them. You don't connect with them. Mm-hmm. You manage everything from the cloud. We definitely manage more context. So when a beacon broadcast, we allow you to attach and embed a whole range of contextual variables to track that beacon's location, where the interaction occurred, attach campaign variables to it, etc. We allow beacons to be managed in massive groups. So ours is the only platform, to my knowledge, that you can take 1 million beacons, put them in a folder, manage them from a content perspective, as a single beacon, but still track each interaction.
And I've noticed that. So even with the airport, where we're looking at, maybe 16 beacons, even with 16 beacons, it's useful to have some of those features to,
right.
So you're not having to type in the same metadata 16 times, because you make mistakes when you do that.
Right.
So it's all of that stuff. So I think you've done a great job of pointing out some of the uniques, and I'm glad that you did that. But tell me a bit about how I can use your platform to create an app.
Well, we have what we call a physical SDK. We initially called it a physical web SDK because we ported all the functionality of physical web into an app. So we encapsulated the characteristics of a physical web browser into an SDK. So like any SDK, 8 or 10 lines of code, and you connect it in, you can immediately scan for physical web beacons in an app. So we did that initially because of the slowness of development of the physical web, and at large, and we recognize that within an app you have a captive audience. Now, I may not be able to train the entire world that I have a physical web beacon that I can interact with, but I can train the users of an app to say, wow, if you want to know what's nearby, hit the nearby button in your app. You instantly scan for nearby physical web content. And we also learned from that experience fairly quickly that, in many apps, I'd call them an experiential app, not an experimental and experiential app. A lot of the content really comes from where you are. If you're going to zoos or ballparks, you can provide all the content. So we did that as a pilot with the Nashville Sounds, a baseball stadium, and we, because we're taking an SDK and really putting a brand wrapper around it, from project sign-off to having a live app in the App Store was 3 days. From the time the ballpark gave us the go-ahead to go do it, we had a branded app live in the App Store. Now, all the content, and over a period of 2 days, we created 120 content elements that we deployed and associated with beacons in the stadium, so that when people moved around the stadium, they saw different content. They understood, food and dining options, and through the dynamic management, the sounds were able to keep content fresh throughout the game. And as an experiment, we even changed content to beacons as each player came to bat. So you could look every time a player came to bat and see information, statistics, etc. about the player that came to bat. So that took some active management, but we experimented with a lot of the different things that you could do, and now we're going to go back and do it again this year as the season's ramping up, and learn from those experiences last year. But the bottom line is, if you're a zoo or a museum or a ballpark, you can produce an app. We charge $1,000, to produce an app. We can have it live for somebody in a relatively short period of time, and then they can create and manage all their content, as physical web touch points.
So for $1,000, you kind of get the shell of the app, and the content is really web content that is being triggered by physical web beacons.
Right, it comes from beacons.
On the App Store, less than a week, $1,000. It's an app, and it's also physical web, so that people can browse with Chrome browsers on the billion.
Well, the beauty of deploying your content, your app content, through let me call it a physical web app, is your content's also available to people that don't have your app instantly, right out of the box. People with Chrome can interact, which creates an interesting opportunity. If you really want to drive people to your app, the Chrome content can say, here's information. For better information, engage with the same touch point through our app. So, our platform has what we call conditional content. We could have the same beacon reflect different content to any number of different people based upon a lot of different variables. So we can show Chrome users different content than app users. We could have 10 apps that all reflected the same beacon, and every app would see different content, all independently managed. So that's one of the key attributes of our platform, is that it's a content switch. If you have a physical web touchpoint, i.e. a beacon, it has a unique ID, and if you associate that ID with content in the cloud, that's what people will see when they're near that. So in combination with an app ID, we can use those combinations to have as many different derivatives of content as we want. And it's technically possible in an app, if you tie in our platform to a personalization engine, to have personalized content. With the physical web beacon, we know where the person is, we know what they're interested in, what content. We know obviously the time. When you add the app in, we also have who. So then we have a vast amount of contextual information. So the physical web is, or at least when applied to apps, is perfectly positioned for personalization in proximity marketing.
So you're ending the trade-off between web or app, because you can have both. And really, this is an incredible platform for agencies that are servicing small and medium-sized businesses, because the cost of entry is really low, and people can get contextual experiences very, very easily. I want to make sure that we don't finish this without talking about what's new. So that's something that I was aware of. What's new?
Well, what's new is that we've realized that what is different about the physical web is that it allows, it brings physical interactions into the world of search and browsers. So you browse physical web content. You don't interact, you browse. The consumer gets an opportunity to say privately. There's a proxy server in between them in the destination content. So they get to see the metadata, they get to see the title, the description of the content, and say, yes, I want to interact. So there's an intermediate step. We realize that same intermediate step can fundamentally change, if not revolutionize, other technologies that are also based on URLs. And there are many other technologies that are similarly based on URLs, like NFC tags and or QR codes. We did it as an experiment, and we realized that when we brought QR codes onto our platform, a lot of people laugh, and Scott makes fun of the QR codes, but it absolutely transformed the experience. So much so that we talked to a brand new 200,000 square foot venue. They called us about a beacon solution, and we're talking about beacons. And we said to them, we want to discuss QR codes to you also. And they, the response was, QR codes is dead to me, was their exact words. And we said, well, 5 minutes. We'll just show you how it works, and we've got a different spin on QR codes. And after 30 minutes, they said, we're ready for a full deployment system-wide, and we'd like it done in the next 2 weeks. So we're actively right now in the process of doing a major deployment of mixed beacons and QR codes. So the nice thing about beacons and QR codes and or NFC tags is they're all physical touch points. They're all ways to allow a consumer to interact with the marketer. So right now, most iBeacon, geofencing technology are all outbound technologies. You track people's movements, you push them messages. You only have 1 or 2 shots when somebody's in a venue to push them a message. But there's 1,000 points of interaction when you have a shopper or somebody in a museum, when the consumer is standing there in front of something and they have a question. They want to know more about a product. They want to know if there's a deal there. They want more information. They want to talk to somebody. And you can use a touch point, a physical web beacon, a QR code, an NFC tag as a touch point directly to the marketer or the organization in any of those instances to allow the person to connect to more information, directly to a chat page, directly to product information, or in the world of a museum or aquarium to find out more information about the display.
So QR codes aren't the enemy. You're embracing them. You're embracing NFC tags, which basically is kind of a sticker which has a little radio in it that allows you to tap, and that sends a URL amongst other things. But it sends a URL that can trigger a page and experience on the phone.
Yeah, I interrupted you. I'm sorry there, but I probably hadn't explained how the QR experience is fundamentally.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah. Today, if you take a QR code there and you scan it with one of the 100 QR scanners that are out there, most QR codes have shortened URLs.
Yeah.
You see a shortened URL. It sort of vibrates and says, "Here's a shortened URL. Do you want to go there?" Well, the consumer doesn't really know where that's going to go. So they select it. Normally takes 4 or 5 seconds to click through and load all the content from the website. And then 70% of the time you decide, I didn't really want that content. So if you take that unknown, that fear of what am I going to get, then people don't use that product. Also knowing that you have shared your location, your IP address with that underlying website, you've given them an opportunity to put a cookie on your phone, and it's potentially malicious content out there. All those unknowns create a level of uncertainty about QR codes that makes it an uncomfortable technology.
Right.
When you move it onto a physical web platform and it becomes browsable, I can take 4 QR codes, and in the time that it takes to see that shortened URL, I can move my phone across all 4 and see very rich data about what's under that, what the destination is. An example would be, I could take 4 playing cards, put QR codes on the back of the cards, and roll my phone across them and see an image of the card with all 4 of those cards flipped over.
Oh, okay.
That's an example of browsing. So browsing is a fast transaction because we're not downloading websites. We're downloading metadata. We're downloading very small packages of data, so that the transaction is fast. Because a server sits between us and the website, it's private. I'm not exposing my IP address to these destination websites through the browsing process, and through our management platform. When done through an app, we can protect people from going to malicious websites. Let's say a retailer says, I want to have QR browsing within my store. Within that app, we say only our in-network approved content, is viewed. We can keep people from going to any other content.
QR code browser in this case is the retailer's app. So you're just kind of...
Is the retailer's app. Okay. So through our SDK, through one SDK, you get all flavors of URL-based touchpoints. So we have a physical web button if you want to scan wirelessly to content that's in within 100 meters of you. Physical web beacon. We have a QR button if you want to scan visual touch points, like QR codes, and NFC is tactile. If you can tap a NFC tag to interact with it.
Have you had enough experience to get a sense of which of those channels people are using more, NFC, QR code, or physical web, when you've offered all 3?
We've just started pitching only under pilots, this in the last couple of weeks, and it's been extraordinary. Almost everybody has said, this is perfect. And it's not because that they're going to deploy beacons over QR codes. It's because that they say the combination of both these gives me the right kind of consumer experiences in my venue.
Give me one more example of how an application where you'd use all of these.
Let's say you're in a museum.
Yeah.
With physical web beacons, I can have a beacon in a room, and let's say there are 30 pieces of art around the walls of this room. I can't go put a beacon on each of 30 pieces of art. Yes, I can triangulate, using iBeacons, but the fact that I'm standing in front of a piece of art doesn't necessarily mean that I want much information about that. The physical web is inbound. It lets the customer tell you what they want. So I can have content that is relevant to the room at large on beacons, but I can put a QR code on every individual painting and have people walk by. And I can have another set maybe on a rail that sits behind, farther back, so people back there can also interact with direct paintings. And you can have multiple audiences within the app. So when you take conditional content, I can say I'm a kid in the app, and I can see, kid-appropriate content from all those QR codes or beacons. While a patron may see, an entirely different set of content, or you could even set it up where it's question and answer. The kid sees a question and the parent sees an answer, or vice versa. You can really have, interactive kind of experiences. So the precision offered by QR code, yes, they're both URL technologies, but they're completely different in the type of experiences that they offer. In the combination of visual, wireless, and tactile in the same SDK gives an app the flexibility, gives a marketer the flexibility to interact with customers or consumers the way that consumers that best fit the application. So, I see a mixture of all these technologies in many different deployments.
Love it. Yeah, I think it's fruitless arguing whether a hammer versus a chisel versus a saw is better. It's a matter of when you use the right tool, and very often you need to use all of them together.
Yes.
So, all right, Richard. Is there anything else that we need to cover before we sign off? We've covered a lot.
The one thing that I would cover is we're close to the iBeacon space. We have iBeacon deployments, and some people see these two technologies as competitive. They're not at all. It's like a car. You need forward and you need reverse. iBeacon is a outbound technology, primarily designed to push messages at opportune times, where the physical web is an inbound technology designed to let people interact when they want to contact the marketer. Having these both in the same app, it's two different use cases. So I don't see the two as competitive at all, and I see them as entirely complementary. So if somebody has an iBeacon deployment, doesn't mean at all that they can have a physical web deployment.
That's brilliant. Richard, thanks very much. It's been a fascinating conversation. And thanks very much for everyone. If you've been listening, please continue and do subscribe to us on our website, hhgb.us, and on YouTube or Facebook. If you have been, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Steve.
Perfect. Ran out of memory.
Good.
So we're in Nashville, and you were saying that part of the reason you live here is because of the music, and obviously we have this tradition of asking people who are on the podcast what are the 3 tracks they would take to Mars. What would you take?
Yeah, that's a tough question, but I'll give it a shot right quick. I would take Adele, "Rolling in the Deep," just because I like the power of her voice and the pleasure that I derive from listening to it. Knowing that Mars is someplace that you got a world of time with nothing to do but think, I'd probably take Pink Floyd, "Dark Side of the Moon," where the classic music is secondary to just getting lost in your own thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'd probably take the Rolling Stones' "Sympathy for the Devil." Probably because that reminds me of college more than any other song, and there's a lot of good memories associated with it.
Oh, it's just an amazing song. It's one of my favorites. And Adele's one of my favorites. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I saw her here in Nashville 4 or 5 months ago, maybe less than that, not too long ago. She played here.
She's so authentic, isn't she? And that voice is incredible.
And she's one of the singers that really engages the crowd. Just has a nice dialogue with the audience while she's there. So it was a fabulous show. My wife and I had a fabulous time there.
Cool. And before we kind of get into the interview as a whole, I'd be interested to hear just a little bit about how you got into running Bkon. And so you're kind of a serial entrepreneur, aren't you?
Yeah. I've been through many startups. I took a decade off and was energized to start something else. I took time off when I had my son. I really wanted to spend time with my son, and then I realized that he's only going to understand how hard it is to start a company and how much focus one has to have if they see it through osmosis, really learn it through osmosis. So part of the motivation was just to teach my son the process and how much hard work it takes, and part of it was just that I was motivated to start something again.
And how old is your son?
Right now he's 15.
All right.
A freshman in high school.
Yeah. My son's 17, and I didn't do it deliberately, but I've, as well as doing this Bkon thing, I started up my own company, Give the Change, and so it's had that effect that you described. The osmosis is working.
Right.
It's like, I can't get him to focus on doing a job working for the man. He wants to start his own company.
Well, then good for him.
Excellent. All right.